My name is Claire Redding. I'm 37 years old, and the day they tried to strip me of everything I had, my house, my car, even my identity, was the day I sat in a silent Virginia courtroom and nearly gave them exactly what they wanted. She's not military anymore. Everything she owns, it's civilian now. That's what my ex-husband's lawyer said with the kind of smugness only a man with nothing to lose and a courtroom to perform in could muster. His voice bounced off the wooden panels and floated like poison toward the judge. My ex, Ryan, just sat there looking satisfied, like he'd finally cut off the last piece of my spine. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just looked down at the government-issued evidence bag sitting by the clerk's desk. Inside, it wrapped neatly in bubble wrap, was a matte black hard drive. Not just any drive. That drive. The one no one was supposed to ever lay eyes on outside of a secure SCIF. To them, it was just property. A data asset. Something to be divided and distributed like furniture. To me, it was the key to the life they didn't understand. One I had given 20 years to. One I had bled for in ways no court transcript could ever document. But they didn't know that. They saw the blazer I wore off the rack, no longer tailored, no longer pressed. They saw a woman who used to serve and now just used to be somebody. To them, I was a hollow shell of a career. They had no idea what they were touching. Ryan's lawyer turned toward the judge. She's hiding assets, Your Honor. Military or not, she had that hard drive stored in a personal safe under her maiden name. Ryan added, not bothering to look at me. She always said I'd never understand her work. I guess now we all know why. I wanted to speak. I wanted to scream. But the room wasn't made for truth. It was built for procedure. So instead, I sat there, spine straight, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding like it did the morning I got that call from Joint Base Andrews in 2013. Different situation, same stakes. The judge glanced at the drive. Ms. Redding, do you object to the inclusion of this as shared marital property? I could feel my fingertips go cold. I wanted to say, that's not a damn photo album, Your Honor. That's not something you split like a mattress or a summer home. But I couldn't say any of that, because I was still bound, still tied to the oaths I'd taken years ago, vows made not in front of a priest, but in front of flags forged in silence and sealed with clearance. So I said, yes. I object. And on what grounds? Silence. I was already pushing the limit by even being in the room with that drive unescorted. Just acknowledging it existed was already risking a breach. I was about to say something vague, some legalese about sensitive documentation, when the courtroom doors slammed open. Hard. Everyone turned. 6 men entered. Black tactical uniforms, boots polished to mirror shine. Their vests bore no names, no ranks. But their sleeves, oh, those sleeves had a symbol I hadn't seen in years. 2 golden keys crossed over a dark shield. The mark of Joint Force Military Police Tier 4 Enforcement. You don't see them unless something very serious has happened. And when they walk into a civilian courtroom unannounced without clearance procedures, something is very wrong. Or very right. The lead officer stepped forward, papers in hand. Judge Matthews, he asked, his voice firm but calm. The judge squinted, startled. Yes. The man held up a sealed directive. I'm Staff Sergeant Wallace. By order of the United States Department of Defense, we are here to recover federal property. He turned toward the clerk and pointed. That hard drive is not personal. It is classified, restricted under multiple national security protocols. Possession of it outside authorized channels is a felony under Title 18. Dead silence. I didn't move. Ryan's lawyer stood up. Excuse me, what is this? We're in the middle of a custody and asset hearing. The sergeant didn't even glance at him. Sir, I strongly recommend you sit down. 2 of the other MPs moved forward. One retrieved the hard drive with gloved hands, the other placed a document beside it, chain of custody probably. Then something else happened. Ryan stood. Hands open. Wait, she had that drive the whole time. You're saying I was never supposed to have it. I didn't know. The lead MP turned to him slowly. I'm going to need you to come with us. My attorney finally spoke, half-standing, stammering something about civilian status and procedure, but none of it mattered. The men were already walking out, drive in hand, escorting Ryan behind them. No cuffs, but no choice either. The judge was frozen. The clerk didn't even type. I stood calm, silent. I adjusted the same blazer that used to feel like armor but now fit more like truth. And as the doors closed behind the MPs, I turned just enough to meet the eyes of Ryan's lawyer. He looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. I gave him nothing, not a smile, not a word, just the knowledge that he had no idea who he'd been trying to bury, and that the government had just reminded him, "You don't end up in a courtroom like that by accident." I wasn't always the woman who could sit still while the walls crumbled around her. That calm, that was earned. I grew up in Nebraska, middle of nowhere skies that stretched wider than your dreams ever dared. My father, William Redding, was a retired Marine turned agricultural equipment mechanic. My brother Paul was his golden boy. Navy SEAL full ride to Annapolis, chest full of ribbons, came home to parades, and a girl who waited for him. And me, I was just Claire, the one with the attitude, the one who could take apart an engine by 12 but somehow didn't have the discipline to make her father proud. I joined the Air Force at 19, not to prove a point, but because I didn't want to die in that town with everyone still calling me Paul's little sister. I worked intel, then signals, and finally slid into cyber defense. You'd never see me on a recruitment poster. No perfect smile, no crisp salutes. But I made more moves in war rooms than most people make in an entire combat deployment. But to my father, I was still just the girl who hadn't earned it. Ryan came later. We met on a civilian security contract in Qatar. He was ex-Army SWAV, fluent in 3 languages, and made every empty space feel like it had music playing. He was the first man who didn't treat me like a technician with a chip on her shoulder. At least, not at first. He said he liked that I was quiet, that I didn't perform. He liked that I could keep a secret, hold a stairwalk into a room without asking for permission. He said that. But the truth, Ryan liked the idea of me. He liked saying his wife worked with the Pentagon, that she was in tech, but like secret tech. But when the doors closed, he didn't want the version of me that stayed quiet because she was trained to. He wanted me small, manageable, civilian. We married too fast. I told myself it was real. That maybe this was the first man who saw me, not the clearance, not the job, not the old chip on my shoulder, but me. We bought a house in Alexandria. I started teaching part-time at a cybersecurity think tank between rotations. I had a desk now, not a go bag. A badge that buzzed through doors, not one you had to lock in a vault. I was settling into what they called transition life. But transition is just another word for erasure if you're not careful. Ryan grew bored. I could see it happen in real time, the way he stopped asking about my day, the way he started needing space. He hated that I was better with silence than he was, that I didn't explain myself, that I wouldn't tell stories about the places I couldn't name. And when the lockdowns came, when the programs were frozen and everything classified went black, he found the one thing I kept: the drive. He didn't know what was on it. He couldn't. But that didn't stop him from taking it. I found out later he'd tried to plug it into a personal laptop. Idiot. He thought it was old mission footage, thought he could use it to negotiate something in the divorce, maybe even blackmail me. Who knows? People get desperate when they realize they were never the most powerful person in the room. He handed it to his lawyer like it was leverage. I tried everything I could to avoid escalation. I contacted the DoD, filed an internal report, tried to trigger a low-visibility retrieval. But red tape moves slow when it's trying to avoid bad press. So I sat through 3 hearings, let his lawyer pick at me like I was some failed officer who couldn't keep a marriage together. Listened to my own father say, "Maybe if you were more like Paul, you wouldn't have to hide behind all this secrecy." My father testified against me. Let me repeat that. My own father testified against me. Said I was emotionally inaccessible, that maybe Ryan just needed someone real, that I never told them what I did for a reason. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. They wanted to paint me like a shadow, a woman who could hide anything, maybe even a threat. But what they didn't know was that you can't hide a threat that's sanctioned. You don't get to erase a woman just because you never understood her silence and that drive. That wasn't just property. That was the last remnant of Operation Ghost Verge, a kill switch protocol embedded in global infrastructure. a black cell program that required 5 layers of biometric clearance and could only be activated by someone with level Crimson +1 status. That someone was me. Ryan had no idea what he'd touched, but the moment he introduced it into evidence, he triggered a flag that had been buried so deep, even my former director didn't know if it would still ping. Apparently it did, because the next thing I knew, 6 MPs walked into a courtroom like it was breach protocol. They didn't just recover the drive, they reactivated me. And suddenly, I wasn't Ryan's ex-wife anymore. I wasn't William Redding's disappointing daughter. I was Asset Echo 13 again, and people were about to remember what that meant. They escorted me out of the courtroom like I was a national asset gone rogue. No cuffs, no words. Just 6 MPs in full tactical gear surrounding me as if I might bolt at any second. But I didn't run. I walked, straight-backed, eyes forward, like I was back in theater again, moving toward the classified briefing tent while everyone else stood still. The judge didn't even try to stop them. Neither did Ryan's lawyer. And Ryan. He just sat there, stunned, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to speak but didn't know what to ask. For once, the man who always had an answer was speechless. Outside, a matte black vehicle was already idling. No markings. The kind of car that says more in silence than sirens ever could. They opened the door. I climbed in. No one told me where we were going. They didn't have to. You only get picked up like that for one reason: they either want to hide you or they want to use you again. I sat in silence for the first few miles, watching the streets of D.C. blur past. The monuments looked smaller than I remembered, like toys. I was being driven through a city that had no idea what was sitting in the back seat of that car. It wasn't until we passed Joint Base Anacostia Bowling that one of the MPs spoke, a woman, maybe early 30s, eyes like steel traps. She didn't turn around, just said it straight to the windshield. They want you at Gray Room. Now. Gray Room. It wasn't an office. It wasn't even on the books. It was the kind of place you're briefed about being briefed about. I hadn't been summoned there in over 6 years, not since Ghost Verge was mothballed and half the black cell operators were reassigned, retired, or lost at sea. My pulse didn't rise. I didn't ask questions. I just nodded once. When we arrived, I was ushered through 3 layers of biometric scans. Retinal handprint and a voice pattern I hadn't used since I was 28. When the final door hissed open, the air smelled the same sterile cold and humming with tension. Inside, Director Monroe was waiting. Last time I saw him, he was giving me my disengagement documents with a forced smile and a handshake that felt like a funeral. Now he looked older, paler, his usual iron calm chipped at the edges. "Claire," he said. "Just my name. No rank, no call sign, no pleasantries." That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. "What the hell did he plug in?" I asked quietly. Monroe didn't answer right away. He turned to the screen behind him and brought up the waveform signature of the drive. My drive. Your ex-husband Ryan Dorsey Monroe said activated dormant encryption within Tier 5 infrastructure when he attempted to access the data. I stared at the screen. It looked like a heartbeat gone wrong. Spikes where there should be none. Noise where silence used to live. Ghost Verge wasn't supposed to be live, I said. It wasn't, Monroe replied. Until now. I exhaled slowly. Tell me it's contained. He didn't respond. That told me everything I needed to know. I was no longer being pulled back in for a debrief. I was being reactivated because they needed a scapegoat, or a savior, or maybe both. You wrote half the protocols, Monroe continued, and you were the only operator who ever achieved full synthesis with the embedded kill switch triggers. In other words, they couldn't shut it down without me. You realize I'm in the middle of a divorce hearing, right? I said bitterly. A man tried to steal classified information from my personal effects. I should be suing him for federal violations, not being dragged into this. Monroe looked me dead in the eyes. Claire, we're past legality. This isn't about courts anymore. The code buried in that drive is waking things up, things we're not ready for. If Ghost Verge completes its resequencing loop, we could be looking at system-wide purges. Civilian grid access international intel shares black channel collapse. He trailed off. He didn't need to finish. I knew the consequences better than he did. because I helped build them. Ghost Verge wasn't just a kill switch for enemy infiltration. It was designed for internal collapse prevention. If someone triggered it manually or unknowingly, it would start pulling classified threads from the deepest layers of military and civilian systems alike. It would assume the system was compromised. And it would clean house. I rubbed the back of my neck where the tiny scar from my clearance chip still tingled. They'd removed the hardware, but not the ghost of it. And if I don't help, I asked. Monroe's expression didn't change. Then the system continues, until it purges itself. And you. And everything you've ever touched. That's when I knew the real reason they brought me in. This wasn't a rescue. It was a warning. They didn't need me because they believed in me. They needed me because if I was the source, I'd also be the first to burn. And Ryan had no idea what he'd started. He thought he was hurting me. But the man had just pulled the pin out of a grenade and handed it to a courtroom full of civilians. They had one option left: now reinsert the asset. But I had my own plan, and it didn't involve saving them just yet. The moment the door to the gray room closed behind me, the silence hit harder than any shout could. 6 years. 6 years I'd kept my head down, lived quietly, followed every rule they set after my forced retirement. And yet, here I was, back where it all started, as if those years meant nothing. As if the blood, the memories, the lives lost during Ghost Verge hadn't cost me enough. They wanted me to fix the mess they created, or let it bury me. I walked slowly through the corridor of the facility they'd once used for Black Ops simulations, my boots echoing off concrete walls lined with one-way glass. I saw reflections of my own face, older now, more guarded, but still carrying the weight of everything they'd buried with the program. There was a control room waiting for me, familiar, cold, and at its center sat a single terminal, isolated, shielded humming like it remembered me. Monroe's voice came over the intercom. "We've loaded the last known configuration from your secure backup. You're the only one who ever passed the handshake protocol. Claire, we need you to re-engage the core. Re-engage the core." It sounded like a system command, but to me it meant something else entirely. I stepped forward, placed my hand on the biometric pad. For a moment, the light blinked red, and I held my breath. Then green. The system recognized me. It always would. "Welcome, Agent Claire Ryland." My name, my real name, the one Ryan barely ever used. He'd always introduced me as Claire, my wife, like I was an accessory. Never Claire Ryland, former operator. Never Claire with 3 commendations and a near-lethal debrief. He never saw the real me, only what I gave him. Now he was about to pay for underestimating that. Lines of code flickered across the monitor. Symbols, keys, sequences that looked like gibberish to anyone else, but to me it was like reading a journal I'd once written and burned. The system was still alive. And worse, it was listening. The problem was, so was someone else. A red line of text appeared across the top of the terminal. External query received. Decryption attempt in progress. No signature, no source. My blood ran cold. That meant Ryan or someone using the drive was still actively probing the system, and if they succeeded even for a moment, the entire chain would activate. Kill protocols, memory purges, false flag alerts to global defense grids. It wouldn't just ruin lives, it would erase them. I slammed my hands against the desk and pulled up the failsafe route I'd hard-coded during the Verge design phase. Only 2 people ever knew about it. Me and my brother. I blinked. My brother. I hadn't spoken his name aloud in years. Jared Ryland, Captain, Delta, decorated, dead. Or at least that's what they told me. But as I stared at the string of emergency code he'd written into the failsafe, a pattern I hadn't seen since the funeral, I knew something didn't add up. The code was updated. Recently. Subtly. Jared had touched this. Which was impossible, because Jared had died in the Myanmar breach 4 years ago. Body never recovered. No black box. Just a closed casket ceremony and 3 salutes that felt more like lies than honor. Suddenly, the problem wasn't Ryan anymore. it was who gave him the drive, and why they wanted Ghost Verge awake again. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I could shut it down, trigger the internal burn, and wipe the core clean. It would stop everything Ryan's decryption, the AI wake-up cycle, the command re-engagement, but it would also destroy the last trace of my brother, the last proof that he was or had been alive. I froze. A slow ache filled my chest. They had taken everything from me, my career, my name, my sense of purpose. Then Ryan stripped away the last of my dignity in court. And now they wanted me to erase the only link I had left to the one person who truly knew who I was. A slow tear rolled down my cheek before I caught it. I hated that they could still make me feel this vulnerable, this cornered. I didn't come back to be their cleanup crew. I came back to find out why they were still playing God with ghosts. I shut the terminal off and stood. The screen went dark. Monroe's voice snapped in over the comms. "Claire, we lost the feed. What the hell are you doing?" I walked out of the room. "They're not the only ones who get to ask questions," I said quietly. Because if Jared was alive, and someone had given that drive to Ryan on purpose, then this wasn't a coincidence. This was a trap, and I had just walked straight into the center of it. The next morning, I was already packed. I didn't tell Monroe, didn't tell the committee, didn't even check in with the deputy liaison. I just left the compound quietly at dawn like I used to before operations, slipping into silence with a single bag and a mission in my blood. Because this time, it wasn't about protocol. It was about truth. I drove east, through Nevada into Utah, then Colorado. I kept the windows down and the music off. The air helped me think. I needed space between me and the agency's endless eyes, even if it meant I had to act like a civilian again. I stopped at a gas station off Highway 70 and used a burner phone I'd picked up in Ely. The number I dialed hadn't been used in 6 years. But the second ring cut short. "Speak," said a woman's voice. I paused. Is this Echo 7 a breath? A shift in tone. "Who's calling this line?" "This is Scythe Red." Silence. Then no. That call sign's dead. Not as dead as Jared. A sharp inhale. "Claire." Her name was Tasha Reed, former tech analyst cyber division. She'd been part of Jared's unit during the Verge briefings. Smart, blunt, and fiercely loyal. She also had the distinct advantage of having gone completely off the grid after the Myanmar breach. Everyone thought she died in the same op, but I remembered the look in her eyes the last time I saw her. She was planning an exit. And Tasha never did anything without a contingency plan. She agreed to meet me, but only in a town called Trinidad, Colorado, a place small enough to go unnoticed with mountains tight enough to conceal signals. By nightfall, I was walking through a half-closed diner. She was already in the booth, hood-up fingers around a coffee mug like it might reveal secrets. When she saw me, her mouth tightened. "You look tired. You look like a ghost." Tasha cracked a grin, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You found it, didn't you?" "The drive?" I nodded. "Worse. Someone gave it to Ryan. Your husband X." "Barely." She closed her eyes for a beat, processing. "That's not random. If Ryan got that drive, it's because someone wanted it public. I think Jared's alive." That made her go still. Like a wire inside her had just snapped. "That's not possible. I saw his key code in the Verge failsafe. Updated less than 2 years ago. No one else knew about that entry pattern." Tasha leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Claire, we buried Jared." "No," I said. "We buried a flag. No body, no dog tags, no traceable ping on any channel. That wasn't closure. That was cleanup." She looked at me for a long time, then slowly reached into her coat and slid a worn photo across the table. It was a blurry surveillance shot. Forest edge. 2 men in fatigues, faces obscured, but one had Jared's posture, his gait, and the tattoo I knew better than my own, a half-moon scar across his left forearm just below the elbow. Where was this taken? Lithuania. 6 months ago. Agency won't touch it. They say it's old data, but that file wasn't even in circulation. I stared at the image. Why would Jared fake his death? Tasha lowered her voice. Because Ghost Verge didn't end in Myanmar. The words felt like a blow to the ribs. She explained everything she'd pieced together. That Verge wasn't just a Black Ops AI, it was part of a layered misinformation network designed to simulate leadership behavior in proxy nations. When the system began predicting civil war outcomes before the actual conflict occurred, someone got scared and tried to shut it down. But Jared had seen what it could do, and if he knew the agency would silence him, he'd run. Then he leaked the drive, I asked. Tasha shook her head. No, he'd never risk you, but he'd risk Ryan. She raised an eyebrow. If Ryan was being watched, tracked, or controlled, yes. It hit me then. Maybe the drive wasn't for Ryan. Maybe Jared knew Ryan would be sloppy enough to lose it, to brag, to let it surface in court. Maybe it was me he was trying to reach. I sat back, pulse pounding. He wanted me to trace it, not the agency. Tasha nodded slowly. You're the only one who ever knew how to override the deep layers. If Jared wanted the truth found, he'd bake the map into the data. He'd count on you. My breath caught. Then I have to find him before they do. Tasha slid a USB key across the table. Encrypted nav routes. Shadow pings. It's not proof he's alive, but it's proof someone doesn't want you finding out. I took it, fingers shaking. As I left the diner and stepped back into the Colorado cold, the street felt different, like the world was breathing secrets again. Like I wasn't chasing ghosts anymore, I was chasing someone who wanted to be found. 2 weeks later, I was standing in front of a rusting airfield hangar just outside of Rzeszów, Poland. The wind howled off the flatlands, cutting through my coat like paper. I stared up at the hangar, unmarked military-grade cold as the grave. My boots crunched on frost-covered gravel, but I kept my steps light, like I'd been trained, like I never stopped being what they called me once Scythe read. Inside my pocket was the flash drive Tasha gave me. Its data had pointed here a safe route, encrypted coordinates, and a ping that reactivated the second I crossed into Poland. The last ping came from inside this hangar. I stepped forward. The door opened before I touched it. No guards, no cameras. Just silence, that kind of silence that made your instincts wake up screaming. Claire Vance said, a low voice from the shadows. American. Tired. Heavy with something I hadn't heard in a long time. Guilt. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. And then he stepped out. Jared. Same storm-gray eyes. Same jawline sharp enough to cut silence. But leaner now. Hardened by years off the grid. He looked 10 years older than he should have. But he was real. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just said why he didn't pretend. Didn't offer a fake smile or weak justification. He just looked me in the eyes and said, because they were going to kill you too. That cracked something in my chest. They already did, Jared. The day you let me believe you were dead. He lowered his gaze. I had to choose. Expose Verge and risk you, or disappear and wait for someone to see the signs. You could have told me. My voice broke. I would have run with you. No, he said. You would have stayed and fought and died. That's not what I wanted for you. I took a step forward. And what was I supposed to do? Just grieve and move on while you lived in a bunker in Eastern Europe? He sighed, stepped aside, and motioned for me to enter. Inside the hangar was a vault. Servers' cables, multiple encrypted monitors flashing quietly. A miniature fortress of data. Every line of code evidence. And there in the center, a single blinking red cube. The Verge core. I cloned the system before the Myanmar purge, Jared said. The agency only thought they killed it. My breath caught, and the drive Ryan had a decoy. The real keys are here. I stared at him. You used my ex-husband. No, Jared said. I used his arrogance. The court, the leaks, the media, all of it was bait. You were the only one who could follow the trail without triggering internal alarms. I swallowed. You played us all. I saved your life. That was when the door behind us slammed. Red lights flared. A high-pitched alert started ticking through the air. They're here, Jared muttered. I turned. Boots. Shadows moving fast outside. Multiple vehicles, the kind that didn't carry court-martials, they carried silencers. I ran to the console. We have to move the data. Burn this location. No time. Jared said, already pulling open a secondary drive bank. Get the cube. You know the fail-safes. I yanked the cube loose, red sparks flaring along its base, and stuffed it into the thermal bag I'd carried halfway across the world. What happens now? I asked. We separate, Jared said. Again. No. I stepped in front of him, not this time. But before he could argue, the roof exploded. A thunderous crack ripped through the hangar as 3 black-clad figures dropped in on rappelling lines, guns raised. Get down, one of them shouted. I tackled Jared as bullets tore through the air. One hit a console, sparks showered over us. And then, just as suddenly, another crash, this time from the front entrance. 6 more figures stormed in. Tactical armor, United States military police insignias, and behind them Commander Elridge, my old handler. He saw me, froze. Then, with steel in his voice, he barked, "Stand down. This woman is protected under Black Classification 7. The attackers hesitated. One raised his gun. Elridge shot him through the shoulder. Chaos broke loose, but only for a moment. The MPs took control, handcuffed the infiltrators, and sealed the building. I stood there, breathless cube clutched to my chest, heart hammering like a war drum. Elridge walked up to me. Agent Vance. You weren't supposed to survive this. I stared. Then why help me now? He looked at Jared, then back at me. Because if Verge is still alive, and in your hands, it's safer than in anyone else's. A cold silence passed between us. Then he nodded. Get out of here. You have 12 hours before this whole place gets scrubbed. I turned to Jared. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real anymore. I just said, come with me. He hesitated. Then he did. As we ran into the morning light, onto a stolen transport truck, into whatever came next, I realized something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and I was done running from it. It's been 8 months since Poland. 8 months since the courtroom, since the flash drive, since 6 MPs stormed through my life and shattered everything I thought I knew about justice, vengeance, and control. I live in a city now where no one knows my name. A small coastal place with thick trees, salt air, and a sky so blue it almost feels fictional. I don't use aliases anymore, not because I don't need them, I still do, but because there's no longer a part of me that wants to be someone else. I am Claire Vance, 34, former intelligence systems analyst, daughter of a war hero, ex-wife of a federal prosecutor, and most importantly, now keeper of truth classified above the pay grade of any man who tried to destroy me. Verge is gone. Not destroyed, that's not how data works, but disassembled, buried across 12 decentralized nodes, each one hidden inside physical dead drops around the world. One is in a monastery in Nepal, one inside the hard drive of a weather balloon station in Argentina, one even rests in a dog shelter server farm in Seattle, and only I and Jared know how to reassemble them. We created a lock system that requires both of us to activate it. Mutual keys, mutual consent, a digital dead man's switch. If one of us dies, the other can't open it, because that's what power should be, not in one set of hands, not without consequence. Jared lives nearby now. We don't call it love, not yet. Too much damage, too much unsaid. But we eat together most nights. Sometimes we walk in silence for hours along the cliffs or the beach, and the quiet says more than words ever could. He started painting again. Oils, huge canvases that look like chaos until you squint, then they reveal satellite maps, encrypted layers, fields of code woven into brush strokes. Me, I've gone back to teaching. Cybersecurity systems theory, digital ethics, all under a pseudonym, of course, and only online. But it feels like something, like planting seeds, like making sure no one ever trusts systems the way I once did. I still have the court transcripts, the photos of Ryan holding my classified assets up in a courtroom like they were meaningless. Sometimes I read them just to remember the version of myself that sat there broke, defeated, and completely alone. But I don't feel hatred anymore. Only clarity. I was never fighting Ryan or even the system. I was fighting silence, the silence that chokes women in courtrooms. That strips veterans of their dignity. That mocks trauma with terms like hearsay and irrelevant. The silence that lets people smile while they gut your story in front of strangers. That silence doesn't win anymore. I do. Last week I got a call, unlisted number, secure line. The voice was filtered but formal. "We've reviewed your containment of the Verge threat," it said. "You're being cleared for reintegration under Shadow Protocol." "Welcome back, Scythe Red." I said nothing. I didn't accept. I didn't decline. Because the thing they still don't understand is I was never in it for the uniform, or the missions, or the rank. I was in it for the people they couldn't see, the collateral, the ones like me. And now I serve on my own terms. Maybe I'll rejoin, maybe I won't. But if I do, it won't be quiet. It'll be righteous. I keep the cube in a black vault under the floorboards. Triple encrypted, biometric sealed, the kind of thing that makes even satellites blink and skip over the property. Sometimes, when the ocean wind is loud enough, I unlock it just to hear the soft hum again. A whisper from another life. A reminder of what I was and what I chose to become. I know people still whisper about me. Quiet circles, black site chatter. Some call me a traitor. Some say I was set up. Others think I never existed, that Scythe Red was a cover name for a failed AI. Let them wonder. The truth isn't a story for them. It's mine. And if one day someone knocks on my door thinking they can steal it, bury it, twist it, I won't need 6 MPs this time. I won't even need words. I'll simply hand them a cup of tea smile and say, "You should have asked who trained the MPs."